dear.
Good evening, Chair.
Thank you for attending the hybrid meeting for planning on Tuesday the 8th of September 2020. For those of you who don't know, my name is Councillor June Molyneux. I'm chair of the committee. Councillor Chris Francis, vice chair. Also present are officers and councillors who will be asked to introduce themselves in a moment. Please note this is a hybrid meeting with some members here in the Lancastrian, some joining from home via Teams or various places. And we also have registered speakers joining remotely. A recording of the meeting will be available on YouTube following the meeting. If you have joined the call or attending in committee room 1 because you're a member of public who's registered to speak, please note you have a time limit of up to 3 minutes. If you're calling on a phone, you'll need to press *6 to unmute your device when invited to speak. The legal officer will operate a stopwatch and confirm when your time runs out. You should then finish or in the middle of making a point wind up within a few seconds. Otherwise, your microphone will be muted. For ease, a pack's been prepared which contains the report, plans, presentation slides and any addendum for each item to ensure everyone can easily follow the agenda. After officers have presented the report and any speakers have made representations, I'll invite members to make comments. When speaking, please reference the paragraph number to enable everyone to follow you. And when you're not speaking, could you please mute yourselves? And then we don't get strange background noises. Our legal officer, Alex, will repeat the motion before the vote's taken to ensure everyone is aware of what's being voted on. And I'll call upon each member alphabetically to vote, and Alex will confirm the outcome of the decision. If technology fails, I'll adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the issue, or if this isn't possible, a new date and time will be organised. Can I ask all members to confirm that they can hear and speak before the meeting begins? I'll go through everybody. There's myself. I can hear, obviously. Councillor France, Chris France. Yeah. Councillor Beaver.
Yeah. Yes, Chair.
Councillor Boardman.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Dalton. Councillor Gordon France.
Here, Chair.
Danny G.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Tommy Gray. Councillor Hargreaves.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Hilton.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Whittam.
Yes, Chair.
And Councillor Whittaker.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. There also are officers Adele Hayes, planning officer.
Yes, Chair.
Karen.
No, Chair, Karen isn't due to be here tonight.
Okay, oh, she's down on my list. Ian.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Yeah. Alex.
Yes, Chair.
And Ruth Remington, Democratic Secretary.
Yes, Chair.
Right, with that, we'll go on to apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor Morwood. No others. Okay. Item 1, minutes to the meeting of the 11th of August, pages 3 to 6. Somebody move those minutes, please. Thank you. Somebody second them. I presume everybody's. Thank you. Well, it's been you're about 4th there. A lot of hands shot up that you couldn't see. I take it everybody's in agreement with those minutes. I've not heard anybody say anything else. If so, yeah, okay. That's okay. Item 2, any declarations of interest? None. Everything's going very swimmingly at the moment. Item 3, planning applications to be determined. There are 7 items to be determined tonight. And for the benefit of the public here, speaking arrangements for planning are as follows. Officers will summarise the report and registered speakers will be invited to speak in the following order. Objector, supporter, parish town councillor, ward councillor, applicant or agent. All registered speakers will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes apart from the ward councillor who may speak for up to 5 minutes. In the event that all speakers are against an application, as chair, I may grant the applicant or agent a time extension. I would respectfully ask members of the public who haven't registered to speak to remain quiet throughout the proceedings and ask that mobile phones are switched to silent and you do mute yourselves unless you're speaking. Item 3A, 2 Oak Drive has been withdrawn from the agenda. So moving on to item B. Emily's Restaurant, 311 Preston Road, pages 7 to 44 on your pack with an update on your addendum. Ian's Crossland's going to present this item. I've registered 2 registered speakers, Jenny Can and who is an objector, and the agent Michael Yang. Jenny and Michael, can you confirm that you'll be able to speak and hear the proceedings?
Yes, this is Michael. I can hear you.
Yes. Jenny? Yes, okay. Ian, can you please present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 7 dwellings with access, parking, landscaping and associated works following the demolition of the existing buildings on the site. The application site comprises the former Emily's Restaurant building and associated car park on the A49 in Coppell. The site is located within a tract of development extending south from Coppell and is in the green belt. The application site is previously developed land.
Today would be good. Sorry, we've just got an issue.
Oh.
It's okay. You're all right.
Shall I continue, Chair? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The framework and local plan allow for the redevelopment of such sites on the proviso that the development does not have a greater impact on openness. The proposed development would result in a comprehensive redevelopment of this previously developed site, which already contains built development. The site is also located between development and as such would infill what is a previously developed site and be viewed in the context of surrounding development. Therefore, furthermore, it's noted that there was previously a terrace of dwellings in the position of the proposed development. It is considered that the impact on the openness of the green belt will be no greater than that which already exists in relation to the built form that exists on the site and in the context of development surrounding the site. On this basis, it is considered that the proposed development would not constitute inappropriate development in the green belt. The application site is highly prominent from the A49 and the development has been designed to fit in with the scale and positioning of existing buildings along this highway and to create an active street frontage with parking kept to the rear. The buildings will be of a contemporary design and will be faced in materials common to the locality, including features that reflect local design. As such, the development would result in a harmonious addition to the street scene that would have a positive impact on this dilapidated site. The proposed dwellings would meet with the council's interface guidelines and would result in no unacceptable detrimental impacts on residential amenity. The site will be accessed from Rivington Place, which already provides access to a cul-de-sac of dwellings. The highway would remain a cul-de-sac whilst adequate parking will be provided in line with the council's parking standards. LCC Highways have assessed the scheme and raised no objection. It is therefore considered that the proposed development would not have a significant impact on highway safety, capacity or amenity in the immediate vicinity of the site. There are no ecological concerns in relation to the site and the site is not in an area of flood risk. Overall, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out on the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Jenny, would you like to make your representations now? Alex, can you start of the timer, please?
Okay. Yes.
Right, I'd just like to say I'm here on behalf of my late mother who died in January, who lived at 16 Rivington Place, Coppell, in the cul-de-sac. I myself was going through chemotherapy at the time as well. I was alerted by my brother that somebody had come along and ripped out vegetation, hedges on land which I assume belonged to my mother's house. So we came down and we spoke with somebody on the site and they just turned around and said, it's not your mum's land, it's ours, we can do what we want to it. And I was very concerned because they were very arrogant about it. Was concerned that they took hedges out that my mother had put in, who'd been there 40 years, and they had no regard for anything. They spoke to my brother, who's a vulnerable person, he's got a disability. He didn't know what was going on. I was concerned that they took hedges out, possibly birds nesting, but they just had no respect whatsoever. They have left the place in a right mess. They have stuck metal fencing up, which looks terrible. There is graffiti all over the pub, which makes it look even worse. Now, obviously, I don't live in the road, but I am representing people that live there. My mum lived there 40 years, and they just didn't care. No respect whatsoever. Now, I need to put the house up for sale at some point, and it just looks an absolute mess down there. Not to mention, it's always been a cul-de-sac. Children have been able to play down there safely. This will not happen if they make the access into these houses down the cul-de-sac. I don't know what else to say because they don't seem to have any regard for anybody.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Michael, would you like to speak now?
Thank
Alex,
you.
can you turn your timer?
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I'll set the 3-minute timer off now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael Young. I'm the Director of Smith Young Architects. The application before you today is the erection of 7 houses, as mentioned by the case officer. When approached to work on a planned application of this nature, there are obviously many factors to consider: the client's brief aspiration, the building context and setting, through to the environmental and historic accountability of the new buildings. Our initial approach to this application was to undertake a detailed study of the architectural history of the site. Knowing the application site policy designation as Greenbelt, we believed any future proposal required a thorough understanding of the site's history in order to sensitively integrate the new proposal into the surrounding context. Historically, the application site has seen 2 major changes over the years, with the introduction and subsequent loss of housing fronting onto Preston Road. We therefore came to the conclusion that the most appropriate architectural response for the application site was to reintroduce an interpretation of this historic condition. Of course, simply reinstating the historic condition in a modern development would not address the reality of modern living. Architecture has a responsibility to reflect both its time and issues such as car parking, amenity space and environmental factors, which have all been considered within the design before you today. Coppell, and particularly along the length of Preston Road, the existing buildings clearly show an architectural history of the town, cataloguing over a century of different styles and tastes. So the question became, how does the development become part of this history without resorting to a pastiche? Our starting point for the design of the houses themselves was to analyse the architectural history of the area, assessing the similarities and differences, which ultimately informed an approach that is both respectful and modern, drawing design influences in the use of materials, form and architectural detailing, which can be seen in the application submission documents. We believe there is a collective responsibility for architects, planners and members of the public to judge an application on its design quality, and on this basis we hope the members feel able to agree with the recommendation put before them this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, over to you members. Councillor Hilton.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just to unmute myself. Thank you. I do have some concerns about this development. I think it's, first of all, it's quite sad that we can't redevelop the current building. Then we feel that we have to knock it down. I'm concerned about 7 houses for a small site. The site currently consists of a building and some open space in terms of a car park. I'm concerned about the need to protect the green belt, particularly the openness. Traffic and noise disruption to a quiet cul-de-sac also concerns me. So in terms of the development, I do believe that it is over-intensification of the site, and it could potentially have a harm on the local amenity moving forward. So I do have some concerns about that, particularly with parking on the road, etc. But my main concern really here is that the number of houses proposed isn't in keeping with the spirit of redevelopment of the green belt. I do believe it's over-intensification of a small site, and I think it will definitely have a significant and negative impact on the openness of the green belt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hilton. Councillor Whitaker. Could you unmute yourself, Councillor Whitaker?
I have now.
Yeah, that's it. I heard you then.
Apologies. Yeah, it's in the ward that I represent, and I have some sympathy with the resident that spoke and also some of the points that Alex there. I been on the site. I'm concerned about I think there's too much going on the site. It's very much overdeveloped as far as I can see. The applicant was talking about architectural values and so on and so forth, and I can appreciate that as well. But I think they're trying to get 7 properties on here, which is far too much. The real concern that I've got, however, is about the access on from Rivington Place. I've looked at what highways have said, and I don't agree with it. And I equally don't agree with the suggestion that the amenity of residents of Rivington Place will be adversely affected. So what I'd like to propose, Chair, so that we can go and have a look and other members can see exactly the sort of points that have been made, is that I'm going to propose that we have a site visit, Chair, so that we can go and have a look and see the issue about the amenities, the issue of over-intensity, the issue about some of the points that were made by the resident at the beginning of the meeting, and see where we go. So I'd like to make that proposition, Chair, if I may.
Okay, right. So I've got a proposal. Any other comments from any councillors, please? Anyone else? Councillor Hilton.
Yeah, I'd quite like to second that proposal for a site visit. Actually, then we can see for ourselves. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else wish to comment? If not, I'll just move to the vote for a site visit. Any comments from anyone? No. So, if everybody's happy with going for a site visit, then we will do that. Anybody wish to speak any other way? I take it right. So we've proposed and seconded. Everybody's agreed to go site visit. Okay.
Yeah.
Item 3C. The Eagle Hotel, 122 Bolton Street, pages 45 to 62 with an update on your addendum. Ian's going to present this item. I have no registered speakers. Okay, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the conversion of the Eagle Hotel public house to 5 self-contained flats. Only minor external alterations are proposed to the building and no extensions. The site is located in a prominent position on Bolton Street in a central area of Chorley, close to the town centre. The public house has been disused for some time, with little prospect of this use resuming. There are also a number of other such establishments in close proximity to the site. The loss of the facility is therefore considered to be acceptable in this instance. There will be no impact on neighbour amenity whilst the conditions for future occupiers will be adequate. The reuse of the building itself will result in a positive outcome considering its character and current state of disuse. Off-street parking for 5 vehicles is proposed. Whilst this is below the council's parking standards, the location is considered to be in a highly sustainable location. Secure cycle parking will be provided on site, and LCC Highways raised no objection. Overall, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out on the addendum and section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I've Councillor G and Councillor Chris France wish to speak. Councillor G.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thanks.
Councillor G first.
Oh, not France. My mistake. Sorry. Sorry, Councillor G.
I'll change my name if you want. Yeah, I've no objection to this. I think it's an ideal thing to do. It's bringing a direct building back into use. It's regenerating the area around there, and I'm quite happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor France, no.
I think Councillor G can speak on my behalf more often. I was about to say the very same thing. I was just going to point out that for a lot of these conversions that we've seen, they seem to be composed, in my view, some pub conversion. That is, some of the actual size of these flats has been quite small, but these are really quite large, and I'm quite pleased that they've got parking as well. So I'm more than happy to second it.
Okay, Councillor Beaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I unmuted?
You must be, because I can hear.
Yeah. Yes, it's always sad to see yet another pub going, and yet another pub is being used for accommodation. So I was going to second it, and thank you very much.
Okay. Any more comments from anybody? If not, if anybody objects to this, can they speak now? If not, I'll presume that everybody's in favour. Sorry. Councillor Hargreaves, did you want to say?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask for clarification what Ian said originally about the car parking? I thought he said there was limited car parking. Am I right in that?
Through you, Chair. Yes, there is car parking for 5 cars. The parking standards would actually require 10 vehicle parking spaces from a scheme like this. But given that the site is so close to amenities, transport facilities, it's accepted at the lower level. Is considered acceptable.
Okay.
My concern, Chair, is that obviously they're 5 flats, they're large flats. They're going to probably have 2 people, 2 cars, 10 cars, and they're probably not going to be interested in local public transport. But I'm thinking, where are the other 5 cars going to go? When it's all right, LCC saying these, always saying these are actually okay, but you've got an extra 5 cars here, and perhaps one other. You never know. But 5 cars, 10 cars. And only 5 spaces. 5 spaces for, say, 2 people living in a flat. Each more inclined people have 2 cars. They each have a car. So, is there any other space, or is there any space around where there is adequate parking?
Yep, through you, Chair. I mean, if the lack of parking on the site would form a deterrent to car ownership. Other than that, so you'd be looking at on-street parking and use of council car parks and other car parks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Whitaker, did you wish to speak? Oh, you've not put your hand down from before. That's all right. Councillor Franz.
Thank you for that, Chair. I was going to say, I mean, I think there is a strong case for the parking provision, to be honest, but I'm so used to the phrase of what is it, in a very sustainable, in a highly sustainable location. I think we hear that so often, don't we? There's no reason for having parking because it's in a highly sustainable location, and I'm quite pleased this term to see a highly sustainable location actually have at least some provision of parking. So perhaps I was a little bit too enthusiastic, but still, it's nice to see some.
Okay. Councillor Other France, Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Just to unmute myself, I did note, and I think Ian mentioned it, there is going to be some secure bike parking, and we've passed this in the past with buildings maybe slightly nearer the town centre than this one, but not an awful lot nearer. And I think that's sufficient if you 5 parking spaces and a bike store.
Okay. Any more comments from anybody? So is there anybody who wishes to vote against the opposite recommendation? No? If not, then I'm assuming everybody's in favour. They've not said any different. Okay, so that is approved. That's the opposite recommendation. Item 3D is Whitley Woods and Clayton Woods Parish Club, pages 63 to 80 with an update on your addendum. Ian's going to present this item. Again, he's a busy lad. Ian, can you present this report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of a single-storey building to provide parish council offices and meeting facilities. The building will be located to the rear of the previously approved GP surgery building on the site of the former parish hall building, which is located in a prominent position on Preston Road in Clayton Woods. The proposed development will provide a community facility, which is supported by local and national policy. The building will be of a modest scale and contemporary design, which would complement the previously approved GP surgery building. Given the scale and degree of separation from nearby neighbouring properties, there will be no impact on residential amenity. The site will be accessed via the GP surgery access and would share car parking with the surgery, while surface water drainage arrangements would tie in with the drainage strategy that will be implemented as part of the surgery development. Overall, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, over to you, members. Councillor Chris France.
If jealousy was a reason for refusal, Chair, I think myself and my parish council fellows will probably be very much in favour of a refusal. But I must say, what a wonderful facility that is. And jealousy aside, I think I'd be more than happy to propose this development.
Councillor G.
Yes, I think Councillor France and myself are swapping places a lot. I'm happy to second the proposal. I think it'd be an asset to the community, and so I'm more than happy.
Okay. Any more comments from anyone? Okay. Is everybody in favour of that? If you're not, speak now or whatever. Okay. Nobody said anything, so the officer recommendation is carried. Item 3E, Whitley Woods and Clayton again. Pages 81 to 90, and Ian's going to present this item again with no registered speakers. Ian? Again?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The members will recall that planning permission was recently granted for the erection of a building comprising a GP surgery on the site of the former parish hall building on Preston Road in Clayton Le Woods. The development is being progressed by the council, and this application seeks permission to vary condition 18 in order to alter the point at which the site access must be constructed in accordance with the Lancashire County Council specification to at least base course level. This is in response to delays in the delivery of the scheme and the length of time required to gain the necessary consent from Lancashire County Council in order to implement the access in accordance with their specification. The council seeks to alter the trigger points for the provision of this site access in order to facilitate the delivery of the development in order to provide improved health facilities to the local community in a timely manner. It's proposed that the trigger for the provision of the site access to LCC specification is altered to a point at which the temporary site access is closed. It's considered that there will be no greater impact on highway safety or the efficient functioning of the highway network as a result of the change in the timing for the implementation of the approved access, on the basis that the details of the temporary vehicular access are provided to the local planning authority prior to any construction works taking place. Overall, it's considered that the proposed amendments to the planning permission are acceptable and that the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I have two members who wish to speak. I bet you can't guess who. Councillor France. You're muted.
I'll try that one again. Just let's say, Chair, I think the reasons for this application are perfectly understandable, and I'm happy to approve.
Thank you. Councillor G.
Yes, thank you very much. You've taken the word straight out of my mouth, and happy to second it.
Anyone else wish to make any comments? Councillor Gordon, France.
Yeah, I'd just like to say this is a vastly needed surgery within the Whittle area. I mean, the other surgery has gone from 5,500 patients to 11,000. Anything at all that could improve delivery has got to be seen as a good thing. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody happy with that? Anybody wish to vote against the officer recommendation? Speak now. If not, I presume you're all happy with that. And that's the officer recommendation. Item 3F, land adjoining Curedon Residential Park, Nell Lane, pages 91 to 112, with an update on your addendum and on the second addendum. Ian's going to present this item again, and I've got registered speaker, Parish Town Councillor Sarah Elsey. Sarah, are you able to speak and hear the proceedings? Thank you. Ian, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of 4 dwellings within a site that has planning permission for 115 dwellings on land adjoining Curedon Residential Park. The site falls within the Phase 1 area of the previously approved development, which comprises 22 dwellings and will be accessed via Parkhurst Avenue to the south. There will be no access from Nell Lane. Phases 2 and 3 of the previously approved development can no longer be implemented, as this part of the site now falls within the ownership of a different developer. The applicant now seeks to add a further 4 dwellings to Phase 1 of the development that they are able to implement. The application site is allocated for mixed-use development and benefits from planning permission for the erection of 115 dwellings. As such, the principle of development has been established. The proposed dwellings will be of a traditional design reflecting a previous recent development to the south along Parkhurst Avenue and the design of the previously approved development within which the 4 houses will be located. The dwellings would meet with the council's interface guidelines and would not therefore result in any undue impact on residential amenity. The application site comprises an area of managed grassland with no trees and in itself is of limited ecological value. There are hedgerows to the site boundary which would be retained. It's noted that the site was identified for the provision of a wildflower meadow as part of the wider development that was previously approved, and in order to mitigate the impacts of the development on the part of the site adjacent to Nell Lane. However, this is no longer required on the basis that the implementation of phases 2 and 3 would not now take place. The application site was also identified as an area for surface water attenuation as part of the previous wider development. This is also no longer required on the basis that the implementation of phases 2 and 3 will not now take place. The conditions of the previous consent are such that the details of a surface water drainage scheme must be provided prior to the delivery of each phase of the development. It is proposed that phase 1 of the previous consent and the 4 dwellings proposed here would connect with the surface water drainage scheme to the south within the recent hedgerows development. Members will note that an update has been provided via a second addendum specifying the need for a Section 106 agreement in relation to the biodiversity enhancements and affordable housing connected with the previous approval. On this basis, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out on the addendum and the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, Sarah, would you like to make your representations now? And Alex, can you start the timer?
I'll start the 3-minute timer now.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Elwoody and I'm speaking on behalf of Curedon Parish Council. As often happens in these occasions, I have just been handed the applicant's last-minute amendment, which addresses key points to my objection, but I'm afraid I'm going to read them anyway. Sorry, you're going to get it.
It's okay.
I'm carrying on. Curedon Parish is a small semi-rural parish and we are concerned that if permission is granted for these 4 houses, it may prompt another application for a form of access on Nell Lane, and that would be totally unacceptable. As you know, Nell Lane and Shady Lane are closed and open only to pedestrians due to COVID-19 restrictions. I believe this is not a permanent situation but will be assessed later this year. Should Nell Lane reopen this access to these houses, could again be another unacceptable proposition for the residents of the area. The applicant wishes to add a further 4 dwellings in place of an area identified for surface water attenuation tank and wildflower meadow. These are features of the application for 115 houses. This application disregards the existing permission for this area of attenuation and wildflower meadow. Where does the applicant suggest the runoff water for 115 approved houses will go if 4 houses are built on the identified area for a surface water attenuation tank? Why does the applicant think it is acceptable to build 4 houses on a site that was already being agreed as a future wildflower meadow for this housing estate? Removing a wildflower meadow from a previously approved plan in favour of 4 houses within the agreed 115 houses is totally unacceptable and contravenes Chapter 7 of the local plan, as it does not protect or enhance the natural environment. In fact, it goes directly against the council. Retaining a small wildflower meadow is little consolation to this environment when councillors have already agreed to the loss of the valuable existing wildlife and their habitats by approving 115 houses on this site. If this wildflower meadow is removed, it will show a complete disregard for a small but valuable part of Cureton's greenbelt. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Adele, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I just want to clarify a couple of points, if I may, with regard to this proposal, hopefully to avoid any confusion. Essentially, the update on the addendum that's numbered number 2 is as a result of further discussions between officers this week, really, in response to some of the issues that were being raised by third parties. It's not as a response to anything that the developer has advanced, so I just want to make that point. And I just want to reassure members that this proposal doesn't involve any proposal to open up the Nell Lane access. Members will be aware that the development on the wider site was approved with access through this site because the current applicant was hopeful of developing the site out in its entirety. It looks now that that's not going to happen, hence we have a separate application for the land further north with the access off Nell Lane that will be reported back to members in due course. The actual biodiversity requirement was required simply because the whole of that site was being developed. Redrow are not doing that, so at this moment in time that land remains undeveloped and hence it's not actually required as part of Redrow's site. But we are mindful that should Redrow renegotiate their position, that we need to have a mechanism in place to ensure that that biodiversity is still mitigated for and provided, hence the update on the addendum. And just to clarify again for members, I'm sure you're aware, but this site does not fall within the Greenbelt. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Over to you, members. People out there. Councillor France.
Thank you, Chair. I just want a bit more clarification. Obviously, this application has an immense impact. I mean, phases 2 and 3 aren't going to go ahead. But in terms of phase 1, the S116 contributions and the affordable housing and the environmental sustainability things we need to put in place, I would be interested to see, I'm sure others would be as well, the residents themselves will be interested to see how we're going to move on with the phase 1. I know it's not in this application, but I am certainly curious about it because it sort of pertains to it. What are the next steps to sort of secure these changes to the phase 1 application?
Okay, which Adele, is it you or Ian?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, it is always somewhat difficult when you have a phase development when the land hasn't been secured by a developer. In this instance, the planning permission exists for phase 1. And it is subject to a whole series of conditions pertaining to each of those subsequent phases. At this moment in time, Redrow will only be advancing the details in respect of phase 1. There is also a legal agreement that sets out a requirement for the provision of affordable housing. This parcel of land had effectively been disaggregated from the wider site because of the need for it to be retained for the surface water drainage, attenuation tanks and the biodiversity. But as a process of default, because the developer isn't going to be doing that, that requirement has now been removed because the surface water drainage can be dealt with for an additional 4 houses and phase 1 through the developer's own site. If a separate application is approved at some point in the future, then that developer would need to make up their own arrangements for the mitigation for the biodiversity and the drainage issues. Because this land has been disaggregated, I'm somewhat concerned that an additional 4 houses would add to the mix and the balance for the provision of affordable houses. Hence, while we feel that while 4 houses wouldn't in itself trigger an affordable housing requirement, the cumulative impact with 24 would. So this is why we're suggesting that the resolution is for a Section 106 obligation. It may well be that we have further discussions with the developer following this meeting. And as part of that negotiation process, it's actually a supplemental to the main agreement that picks it all up in any event.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
To have come back, I was just going to say, it does seem like this is a really messy way to have gone about it. I mean, but personally, I would have felt that actually just entering a new application for the whole site would be logical, or amending a previous application for phase 1. But to go around and then apply for a second tiny amount of this really large phase 1 site is a convoluted way of going about business. But that's just me.
I do agree with you, Councillor. Unfortunately, the way the whole process works, there is an extant planning permission in place. If a developer came forward with a revised site edge read for additional houses, it wouldn't be the same scheme. So we're starting again from scratch. There's implications in terms of how we assess it. There's implications in terms of the actual planning fee for processing the application. There's a whole raft of reasons why a developer would choose to do it this way. The reason, because it's a split site and they haven't actually been able to acquire the land beyond the ownership from phase one, we end up with this situation that we're attempting to deal with as best we can. And as I say, this is why I do apologise to members for this last minute update and for the recommendation, but I think we need to secure the position in terms of ensuring that the biodiversity is resolved. In case Redrow do the deal and come back for phase 2 and 3, and in case that or alternatively to ensure that the uplift in the numbers is reflected on the affordable housing provision just for A. And like I said before, it may very well be that those discussions actually draw out a need for a supplemental agreement for the wider site, which I suspect is what will happen, but I'm not in a position to recommend that to members because that's not what's before you tonight.
Yeah, just one last one if you don't mind, June.
Okay,
I was just going to
yeah,
say, it's so hard. Actually, I'm sure members feel the same way to vote on this particular application when it's got such an enormous impact and it's so firmly tied into the rest of the site. And without seeing the changes that are going to come up to the S106 contribution, it's really hard to. I mean, it's a difficult one to approve because it's tied in so closely to the first site.
If this application would have come in purely for the land on what is phase 1, and it would have been an application for 26 houses. Sorry. Yeah, then there would have been a requirement for affordable housing on just that. So the section 106, just to make it clear, will be a requirement for the uplift in the numbers. There's already a section 106 agreement in place that requires the equivalent of a 30% provision. All as we're doing is including these 4 houses in that provision.
Okay.
I've got Councillor Whitaker and Councillor Whittam. Councillor Whitaker.
Just let me mute myself. I am unmuted. Right. Thank you, Chair. I have some concerns about this. It's a very complicated thing, as Adele alluded to there. It's a complicated site. There's 115 houses already approved. Oh, sorry. Forgive me, Chair.
It's quite all right.
All right.
I can hear you better now.
I do apologise. There's been a lot of discussion on this, and I had some experience in Curedon. But the thing we talk very much flavour of the month is the environmental issues, and Adele alluded to attenuation tanks. This was going to be a water runoff. This was going to be a wildflower meadow, and so on, which we're all supposed to be in favour of, and I am especially. And I just think, just by trying to get an extra 4 on here, I understand the need to secure 106 or whatever that is to get, and that's one of the issues about the new planning legislation about affordable housing and how we get that sort of thing. But I just think I'm a bit unhappy about voting for this because of the complicated nature of what is there already and what might follow, of which we're not sure. So I'm a little bit at a loss. I'm looking for local people to give me some advice. Thank you, Chair.
Adele, you want to come in?
Yeah, through you, Chair. If I may assist, just to try and unravel it all a little bit. It is complicated, but just because it's complicated doesn't mean that we can't determine the application. If, as I said, if this application would have come in simply for this part of the site, then there wouldn't be a requirement to have attenuation tanks on the Redrow land. There wouldn't be a requirement for the wildlife meadow to be in this location to provide the mitigation. The reason that was there was because of the consequences of developing phases 2 and 3. Redrow are not developing phases 2 and 3. Another developer is currently advancing a scheme for that, and that will have to deal with the drainage and the biodiversity as part of that development proposal. if we approve this without, or if members, resolve to approve these 4 houses without the additional section 106, then what we could have is a situation that is, if Redrow did carry on and actually acquire the site, then we lose the biodiversity that we've secured on this site. That is the purpose of the 106 agreement, and the 106 agreement would be drafted in respect of biodiversity along the following lines. Now, this is not drafted in legal speak, but it would be basically an undertaking not to implement phases 2 and 3 without ensuring that adequate biodiversity is actually advanced for that element of the wider site. So that's what that 106 part of would deal with. And similarly, each phase of this wider development is subject to a restrictive condition that requires the details of drainage to be submitted. So as part of phase 1, the surface water drainage would be coming through the Redrow site, and the capacity is such it can deal with it. For phases 2 and 3, we would need to see those details, and that's not an unusual set of circumstances when dealing with larger schemes. It's subject to the future details being agreed through a condition discharge. I hope that provides some clarity and some certainty for your members.
Okay. Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Chair. This is a development I haven't got much confidence in at all. I believe it's a collaborative tactical plot on behalf of the developers to force the issue over Nell Lane by sort of sealing off the Parkhurst Avenue end of this larger plot of land. I won't be voting for it. Whilst it seems fairly innocuous in itself, just actually building 4 houses, it's the overall impact on the rest of the proposals that are going to come before this planning committee in the future. So I don't have much faith in it at all, and I won't be voting for it.
Okay, I've got Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. I think Councillor Whitaker is right. It is a very complicated application, and it does look a bit like applications by stealth, where you go for another 4 houses on the back of an application that's already been granted. However, we have to be mindful that we have our own professional planning officers scrutinising these applications. The fact that if this application came in as 26 houses, as Adele said, it would trigger the affordable housing contribution, and we would have to look at mitigation measures with regards to runoff water and sewage and drainage, etc., on its own. So I think we need to, as a committee, have to have confidence our planning officers have done what they're paid and professionally qualified to do, which is scrutinise these applications, so that we, as the committee, can ratify what they believe is a decision. I do think it's complicated. I've read through it several times now, but on when you look at the proposal for the further 2 developed sites, we need to have confidence that when they come in, we scrutinise them as much as we do with every other application, and make sure that they stand on their own 2 feet as they come in, and not rely on anything that's happened in phase 1. So I would be mindful to support the officer's recommendation with this one and move for approval.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Boardman. Councillor France, do you want to come in, or have you just not put your hand down? Councillor Beaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would like to second that proposal of Councillor Boardman. Yes, it is complicated. We may not understand it, but we have to have faith in our planning officers, and we can only determine from what is before us today. Any future phases, any future plans are not part of this, and we cannot take that into consideration.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor France.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to abstain from this one. I'm not trying to bring any of the officers into disrepute or question their skills. What I would say is that I'm actually I'm unhappy really with the applicant in this case, simply because it seems like they have gone about the most complicated means to have done this. And there seems to be completely needless. In fact, actually, if nothing else, I'm angry on behalf of them, of the officers, because it does seem like the most needless way, convoluted way of going about it. If the case is that phase 2 and 3 aren't going to be developed, then simply reapply for phase 1 with these houses in there and make it life an awful lot simpler for everybody else, rather than having to tag on a complicated S106 legal agreement which hasn't actually been drawn up yet and ask us to make a decision without having a look at the S106 agreement. So actually, for me, I can't actually agree to this, in my view, with good conscience, without actually having read the new S106 agreement. It really makes it pretty difficult for me.
Adele, do you want to come back?
Yeah, it's not unusual for members and for this committee to resolve to grant planning permission on the basis of the kind of like the headline terms of an agreement, and for the terms of the agreement to be negotiated following it. I do appreciate that the headline terms aren't there, but I hope I've given you that assurance that effectively what the agreement would seek to do would be an undertaking for Redrow not to develop phases A and B without the mitigation. That you know, and if they don't do that, then that doesn't trigger the clause. But obviously, we don't want developers, you know, deliberately subdividing parcels of land to fall under affordable housing thresholds. And whilst it doesn't for the wider site, if this would have come in for the additional 4, I mean, we're only talking effectively just over 1 additional dwelling house. It's not a significant uplift, but I think it's important that we don't let this slip through without that being included within the wider Section 106 agreement. I mean, Chair, there's no reason why, you know, I understand the uncertainty of it, and we have agreed, you know, members have resolved to be minded to approve applications subject to conditions being agreed with you, Chair and Vice Chair.
Yeah.
You know, if you are very nervous about that, then you may want to give some consideration to being minded to approve the application subject to you being included in the final oversight of the Section 106, so that you're given that assurance.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Would that Councillor France give you a little bit more?
Under those circumstances, I'd be happy to approve the application with the S106 application being determined by Chair and Vice Chair.
Any more comments from anyone? I think with this, I'll go through each person for their vote with the way that we've gone. So it's just, I've got a proposal and a second for the officer recommendation with that additional thing that it comes back to the Chair and Vice Chair, that condition. Okay, so Councillor Beaver, for or against?
For, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Boardman?
For, Madam Chair.
Councillor Dalton? Thank you. Councillor Gordon France?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Danny G?
For.
Tommy Gray? Councillor Avon Hargreaves? Councillor Hilton, Alex Hilton?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Whittam?
Against.
Councillor Whittaker?
Against. I don't trust the developer.
Okay. Councillor France?
For, reluctantly.
Thank you. And myself for. Alex?
Members have voted to approve the application subject to the conditions in the addendum and the Section 106 agreement, with the terms of the Section 106 agreement to be negotiated and agreed in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of this committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 3G, St Luke's Church, Brinscoll, pages 113 to 128. Adele's going to present this item. Ian gets a rest. I've got one registered speaker, the agent Christy McDonald. Christy, can you hear and speak? Can you hear the proceedings and able to speak? Silence.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that.
There you go. That's okay. Adele, can you present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application relates to the land upon which St Luke's Church is currently situated, and it's located on the eastern side of Quarry Road towards the eastern edge of the settlement boundary of Brinscoll. The landowner intends to demolish the church under permitted development rights, and the council gave its prior approval for the method of demolition earlier this year in April. This application seeks permission in principle for the erection of 4 detached dwellings with associated parking and domestic gardens at the site once the church has been demolished. It's worth stressing that the scope of permission in principle is limited to location, land use and amount of development. Other matters will be considered at the technical details consent stage in due course. Objections have been received from 27 individuals relating to issues including highway safety, parking, impacts on ecology, loss of residential amenity and flood risk. These are issues that will need to be considered at the technical details consent stage and do not relate to the principle of the development. The site is situated within the settlement area of Brinskull as identified within the Chorley local plan, and members will be aware that policy V2 of the plan sets out a presumption in favour of appropriate sustainable development. Within core strategy policy 1, Brinskull is identified as a rural local service centre where limited growth and investment will be encouraged to help meet local housing needs. The site forms a gap between 2 rows of terrace houses and therefore housing is considered to be an appropriate land use for the location. With regard to the amount of development, an indicative parameters plan has been submitted which identifies a potential layout for the site with 4 dwellings appearing to be consistent in terms of footprint and spacing with other dwellings on Quarry Road. It is recommended that the application is approved. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Christy, would you like to make your representations? Alex, can you start the timer, please?
Yeah, no problem.
Right, I'll set the 3-minute timer off now.
Thank you. Chair, members of the Planning Committee, I do not intend to take too much of your time this evening because the officer's report on this permission in principle application is a robust, clear and concise one which explains perfectly well why the application can be supported by the council. However, by way of a brief introduction, my name is McDonald and I'm a Chartered Town Planning Consultant employed by Stephen Abbott Associates, and I'm speaking tonight as the agent for the application. As the case officer makes clear in the report, the loss of the building has already been considered by the council. Therefore, this application is for the principle of 4 residential dwellings on the site, and the demolition element does not require consideration. The case officer covers the main material considerations in the report, but in summary, it is considered that 4 residential dwellings on that site in that location works perfectly well, given it is the settlement in the settlement of Brinskull, which is identified as a rural local service centre in the core strategy, which means limited growth and investment is encouraged to help meet local housing needs. Therefore, a proposal of 4 dwellings in this location is fully supported in principle by the core strategy. Given that the only elements to be considered with a permission in principle application are location, land use and amount of development, then it is considered that there are no material planning considerations why this application should not be approved. Thank you all for your time, and it's a hope that you agree with the officer's recommendation and the application is approved tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, members. Somebody out there. Councillor Beaver.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to go back to this document. I was looking at the diagram on page 123 about the scale of the houses that are drawn there, and that the size of the proposed houses are bigger than what's knocking around. And I get that it's not the same material. Cultural paragraph 6, cultural, historic and architectural significance of church will be lost. Well, the church is closed. Loss of residential amenity, if that's referring to the church, it's not there. The Japanese knotweed would get sorted out. And a loss of a community asset, well, it's gone. I vote that we accept the officer's recommendation and propose to accept it.
Thank you. Councillor G. And Councillor Boardman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. It makes a change from pub shutting down to having a church shut down. It still saddened me that this happens. Whether you go for a pint or go to pray to the Lord.
Oh, for a prayer.
Go for a prayer, yeah. But these things happen. It's been demolished. So we're now just looking at the planning application for housing. I can't see a problem with it, so I'm happy to go for second the application.
Thank you, Councillor Boardman. Got you.
Just unmuting myself. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry about
Okay.
that. Yeah, in principle, I can't see an objection to the application. I would, however, like to say that, you know, I never like to see any building that's structurally sound be demolished to make way for modern residential properties. This being a lovely stone church building, had got planning permission in 2019 for a single dwelling, and would make an absolutely beautiful single dwelling, as many churches that have been converted have. It's just unfortunately that you know, land is expensive. Developers look for the most profit out of a site, and unfortunately, I think we're probably going to see a little bit more of this in the future. But I'm just like to put my objections forward that I think the building does have historical content and context within the Bristol area, and if it could be saved, it would be great. However, I'm not going to hold a banner up outside and padlock myself to the doors. Thank you very much for that.
Okay. Councillor France.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to talk a little bit about this as the ward councillor for the area. A few years ago, when the site was sold by the committee up at, the parish council at St Paul's, the neighbouring Church of England church, it came to my attention later that they were really pleased that they managed to find a developer who would actually retain the actual structure itself, albeit as a residential house. In fact, actually, it's my understanding that they actually took a lower offer on the basis that the actual church itself will be retained. I know from speaking to several of the members of that body that they were greatly disappointed when applications came in later on for the permitted development right for the demolition of that building, and then the later application, obviously, for the four structures on top. From a planning perspective, I mean, I should say as well, as a person though, I actually used to, albeit 22 perhaps years ago, used to go to St Luke's actually for the scout group that they had there, which has now been relocated. Now, what I would say is, from a planning perspective, it does feel a little bit like a death from a thousand cuts. First, the applications to convert the building to one residential dwelling, then the permitted development right application to demolish the structure, which I can understand why it was permitted due to the fact that it wasn't a listed heritage asset, although it certainly was a heritage asset now as a residence. And then now this application for the four houses. I mean, the residents make lots of very valid points under item 6, but most of them pertain to technical details that have been now under new legislation, now only agreed at the technical phase, and so we can't really talk about. And then also other issues that pertain to the previous development that's under PD rights has now been demolished. Well, now been granted permitted development rights for the destruction of the building. In reality, what we have here is a building that on paper no longer exists, and an application for four houses on a previously developed site, which is permissible, and even despite the fact I don't like this application, I really would love in my personal opinion, to a reason to refuse it. With this death by a thousand cuts method, really leaves me with no means to do so. So I'm a bit lost. I'd like to register my disappointment.
Okay. Councillor Hargreaves.
Can I just ask, it says that number 8 is that there's a passageway that the current houses use. Is that going to remain? Is there going to be a through passage amenity for those people at the back of their homes as there is now?
Adele.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, through you, Chair. This is not. This is just a permission in principle, so the details of layout and the finer details will be subject to technical matters, and ultimately it will depend upon whether the passage is a legal right of way or whether it's just a shortcut that people use. I just want to pick up as well, if I may, on the issue of the heritage asset. It's neither designated nor non-designated, and this building has never been advanced to be attached to the local list of important buildings. So on that basis, it's not classed as or protected as a heritage asset. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Gordon-France.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say my family have worshipped in this church for over 100 years. I can't support this application. It is an iconic building, and I do appreciate what Adele says. There isn't any support for it as a listed building. and you know, the junction, I've seen a few bumps physically witnessed, but they were bumps, they weren't accidents on that junction. Actually, whether no, I shall, as I say, I can't find a reason to refuse, and I wish the applicant had done what he originally wanted to do, which is turn this building into a single dwelling. So I will be abstaining on this application.
Okay. Anyone else wish to make any comments? If not, I'll move to the vote. I think I'm going to have to go through everybody again. Okay. Go on, Councillor France.
I
quickly.
apologise, Councillor, sorry, Chair, but I understand that there's a lot of residents that are happy with this. It is worth pointing out that at this stage that obviously there'll be individuals who aren't quite as savvy with planning law as we are. I understand the comments made by councillors, and I think an abstention is the only one that I can really viably go for. I think a lot of people at home often feel that the planning committee has like there's the be all and end all of planning applications, but I'd just like to point out for those at home that it's not quite the case. We have to root all of and base all of our decisions firmly in planning legislation, and we need to ensure that if we are going to turn something down, it has firm planning reasons for that. And within this document, and overall there aren't that. If we did turn this down, we would be liable to potentially be taken to appeal, which could end up in significant costs for the council and the authority, which is part of my decision for an abstention. I just feel really sad that this asset, you know, and for the residents, that this asset's going to be lost. But
okay, so I'm going to go through everybody alphabetically. So 4 against, abstain. Councillor Beaver.
4.
Councillor Boardman.
Abstain, Chair.
Councillor Dalton. Councillor Gordon France.
Abstain.
Councillor G.
4.
Councillor Gray. Councillor Hargreaves.
Abstain.
Councillor Hilton.
Reluctantly 4.
Councillor Whittam.
4.
Councillor Whittaker has left the meeting, he's had to leave. Councillor France.
abstain.
And myself 4. Alex, over to you for the outcome.
Thank you, Chair. Members have voted to approve permission in principle, subject to the conditions in the report.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 4, draft decision in response to BT consultation on payphone removals, pages 129 to 134. The recommendation is the report is noted and preparation issuing the final notice is delegated to the Director of Customer and Digital in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. Councillor Gordon France, Councillor Chris France.
Chair, do you want me to do a summary?
Do
Or
you
you, no, I'm happy if members are happy with the
Are
content of the
members
report.
happy? Do they allowed to? I'm sure they've read the report. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, as I have, and I'm more than happy to move the report.
So somebody second that, please. Thank you, Councillor. It's been thirded. Anybody else? Any comments? If not, I'll assume you're all in favour. Okay. Item 5, planning appeals and decisions. Note the report, pages 135 to 136. Do you want to make any comment, Adele?
Just obviously we've received quite a lot of appeals recently. I'm mindful with the lockdown restrictions during COVID and the limited availability of my time while I've been on holiday. I was mindful that we haven't actually formally reported to the committee the Pear Tree Lane decision, so it is on there. Obviously members are already well aware that it was allowed, and other one to bring to your attention is the enforcement notice relating to the unauthorised fence at Wigan Lodge has been dismissed.
Dismissed. Good. Mixed report, that one. Mixed. Okay, I note that report. I've just one item in urgent business. Now, following, there was some planning in practice training. One was last night, one was last week, on the new government white paper to do with planning. What they're going to do is send the response from the leader to me as chair of planning, and hopefully I will disseminate that to you. But I propose that myself, vice chair, Councillor Morwood, and anybody who's interested and wants to make comment on that report, if we meet at the next chair's brief to discuss the documents and add any of our comments in it, because I think we should, as a planning authority, we're the ones who have to deal with the planning, that we should. We've not got a date yet, but it will be as soon as possible, and it will be before the 1st of October deadline, so our comments will be included in that. So I'm just giving you formal notice of that. Okay, with that, we're at the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Good evening. And those of you who are travelling home, have a safe journey home. And the rest of you at home, go and put your feet up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you and good night.